Jack Harold was lying motionless on the cold floor, heart struggling, when the security camera caught something unbelievable. Maximus, his loyal German shepherd, appeared in the doorway. The camera recorded him pushing past the door with his paws, nudging Jack, then barking urgently, his eyes locked on Jack's. Maximus knew something was wrong, his instincts kicking in. He didn't stop, even when Jack didn't respond. The camera captured Maximus trying again, pawing at Jack's chest, desperate for a sign. Just when all hope seemed lost, Jack's fingers twitched, a glimmer of life returning. Maximus was still there, waiting for the miracle to unfold. What happened next will leave you speechless. He wasn't supposed to survive. Jack Harold's heart struggled to keep up as the cold floor beneath him became his last witness. Alone in his apartment, the world around him seemed to shrink into a cold, unforgiving silence. No one knew he was there. The life of a man who had once been a proud Marine, now reduced to a shadow of his former self, lay still in a dimly lit room. But amidst this stillness, something stirred in the darkness. Maximus, Jack's German shepherd, appeared in the doorway. With a coat darker than the night, Maximus stepped forward, ears perked, his eyes locked on Jack. The once heroic dog, who had fought by Jack's side in countless battles, now stood as the only hope in this moment of despair. Maximus knew. His paws made a soft click on the floor as he approached his fallen companion, sniffing the air, sensing that something was terribly wrong. His tail stiffened. His sharp instincts, honed through years of military service, kicked into overdrive. Jack wasn't moving. But Maximus wasn't just a dog. He was a warrior. Maximus stepped closer, nudging Jack with his nose, urging him to wake up. He barked once, twice, a soft but desperate plea to stir the man who had always protected him. Maximus wasn't going to leave his side. The camera above captured each moment in eerie silence, the dim light flickering as if to echo the fragility of the situation. Maximus, relentless in his loyalty, pawed at Jack's chest, trying to rouse him, but nothing happened. Jack's body lay unresponsive. His breathing was shallow, too shallow. Maximus, the dog who had shared a bond with Jack deeper than words, refused to give up. He pressed his body against Jack's side, his warm body a stark contrast to the freezing cold air around them. Maximus didn't understand the depth of the situation, but he understood Jack. He knew that Jack had always been his protector, his partner. Now, it was his turn to protect Jack. Maximus gently licked Jack's hand, a soft gesture of love and reassurance. Still, no response came. The camera captured the dog's persistence as he continued, trying anything he could to bring his Marine back from the edge. Time passed slowly, each second stretching, heavy with unspoken words. The silence was deafening. Jack's chest barely rose and fell, each breath weaker than the last. Maximus, unwavering, stayed by his side, his eyes fixed on Jack, refusing to leave. In that moment, the camera caught something, a slight twitch of Jack's fingers. The faintest movement. A sign. Hope, once lost, flickered back into existence. Maximus saw it, his ears perked as he leaned closer. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Jack wasn't gone yet. The camera recorded this miraculous moment, where Maximus' loyalty brought back the life of the man who had always been his hero. The faint movement of Jack's fingers wasn't enough to convince Maximus that it was over. He stayed by his side, his loyal eyes watching every rise and fall of Jack's chest. The room was silent except for the steady ticking of the old clock on the wall, marking each passing second. Maximus nuzzled Jack's face, gently licking his cheek, the dog's warmth in stark contrast to the cold air around them. Maximus could sense the fragility of life. He had seen it before in the field, when death seemed inevitable, and yet, against all odds, survival emerged. He wasn't ready to give up. His body was pressed so close to Jack's that his heartbeat seemed to echo in the stillness of the room. Maximus leaned down to Jack's hand again, nudging it with his nose. A quiet bark, a soft whimper, as if urging Jack to hold on just a little longer. Suddenly, Jack's eyes flickered. They weren't fully open, but the briefest flash of movement told Maximus that his efforts were not in vain. Maximus' tail wagged slightly, a glimmer of hope stirring in him. Jack's breathing, shallow at first, became slightly steadier. Maximus watched intently, his amber eyes locked onto Jack's face, waiting for another sign. The tension in the room was palpable, the seconds stretching out as if the very air held its breath. Then, Jack's hand twitched again. This time, it wasn't a small movement. It was deliberate, slow, but real. Jack was coming back. Maximus let out a soft, relieved growl, his head resting against Jack's chest as if reassuring him, "You're not alone." The Marine was slowly waking up. His eyelids fluttered, and the faintest groan escaped his lips. Maximus pressed even closer, refusing to leave his side, his heart swelling with an overwhelming sense of protection and love. Jack's eyes opened just enough to see the outline of Maximus, the dog who had been with him through thick and thin. His vision was blurry, but the feeling of Maximus' fur against his skin grounded him. It wasn't the end, not yet. Jack took in a shaky breath, his chest rising and falling in slow, labored movements. He reached out, fingers brushing against Maximus' fur. The familiar sensation of his dog's presence sent a flood of memories rushing back. The bond between them was undeniable. Maximus had never left his side, not once. And now, even in this moment of uncertainty, Maximus was there, ensuring that Jack would make it through. The room, once so still, now felt alive with the promise of something more. It wasn't just a rescue, it was a revival, a second chance, not just for Jack, but for the bond they shared. Maximus didn't need any encouragement. His actions spoke volumes, and in this quiet room, he was the hero Jack needed. He had fought for Jack before, on the battlefield, and now, he was fighting for him again. Jack's breath deepened, his grip on Maximus' fur tightening. He wasn't fully conscious, but he knew. He knew that this dog, this loyal companion, had saved his life. Jack tried to whisper, though his voice was barely audible. "Thank you, Maximus." Maximus responded with a soft whine, as if to say, "No need for thanks. I'm just doing my job." The bond between them had always been unspoken, but in this moment, it was crystal clear. The fight wasn't over, but Jack wasn't going to face it alone. Not anymore. Jack slowly began to open his eyes wider, his vision still blurry, but the outline of Maximus was unmistakable. The dog's gentle presence was the anchor Jack needed. He tried to focus, reaching out with shaky hands, brushing Maximus' fur, and feeling the warmth of the dog's body pressing against his. Maximus whined softly, sensing that Jack was coming back to him. Jack's breathing became steadier as his body started to respond, though his movements were slow and sluggish. He had been on the edge, teetering between life and death, and now, with Maximus by his side, he was slowly making his way back. The room, once filled with the silence of uncertainty, now felt filled with the soft sounds of Jack's breaths and Maximus' quiet whines, a comforting rhythm of life that reassured Jack that he was not alone. He tried to sit up, the weight of his body feeling heavier than it ever had, but he was determined. Maximus moved closer, gently nudging Jack's arm, encouraging him to try again. With every movement, Jack's strength grew, and he slowly shifted his body, sitting up just a little more, supported by Maximus' unwavering presence. His mind was still foggy, but the dog's calming presence helped him focus, to fight against the overwhelming weariness. Maximus stayed close, his eyes never leaving Jack's face, sensing that the man was trying to piece himself back together, physically and mentally. Jack's mind wandered back to the battlefield, the countless moments of danger, fear, and survival. But now, in this quiet room, it wasn't about the war or the battles anymore. It was about survival, pure and simple. Maximus had never left his side. Through all the chaos, the pain, and the loss, the dog had been there, his protector, his companion. And now, in the most vulnerable moment of Jack's life, Maximus was once again there, standing guard, offering support in the only way he knew how. Slowly, Jack managed to prop himself up against the couch, his body still weak, but holding on. He turned his gaze toward Maximus, his hand trembling as he reached out to pet the dog. Maximus nuzzled his hand, his tail wagging slightly. Jack could feel the bond between them growing stronger with each passing second. Maximus had never asked for anything in return. He had been there when Jack needed him the most, just as he had been there in the past. Jack smiled weakly, his voice barely a whisper. "You saved me." Maximus looked up at him, his eyes full of understanding. There was no need for words between them. In that moment, Jack knew without a doubt, that this dog, his dog, was not just a pet. Maximus had given him a second chance at life. As Jack's body slowly regained its strength, the future seemed a little less uncertain. Maximus had done more than save him. He had reminded him that even in the darkest of moments, there was still a reason to fight. The bond they shared was something Jack would never take for granted again. And though the road to recovery was still ahead, with Maximus by his side, Jack knew he would not face it alone. Jack could feel his strength returning slowly, but steadily. His body, once weak and trembling, now felt like it was starting to respond to the world again. He could hear the faint sound of Maximus breathing beside him, a constant reminder of the dog's unwavering presence. Maximus had always been there for Jack, through the chaos, through the hardship, but now, more than ever, the bond between them seemed stronger than ever before. As Jack slowly stood up, his legs still shaky, he felt Maximus press his body against his side, offering silent support. The warmth of the dog was grounding, giving Jack the strength to take another step, then another. Each movement was slow, calculated, but the sense of relief, however small, was unmistakable. The pain from his body, which had once been all-consuming, was now becoming a dull ache, something he could manage. Jack walked to the window, the cool air from outside brushing against his face, a reminder that the world continued on. Maximus followed closely behind, never leaving his side. Jack took in a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. His mind was still clouded, but one thing was certain. He had made it. He had survived. And in no small part, it was because of Maximus. The bond they shared wasn't just one of companionship. It was a bond forged in the fires of war, a bond that transcended words. Jack looked down at Maximus, who was sitting at his feet, his amber eyes locked onto Jack's with a kind of understanding that only a dog could possess. Jack smiled faintly, reaching down to scratch behind Maximus' ears. Maximus leaned into the touch, his body relaxing against Jack's leg. There were no words between them, just a quiet understanding. Jack had fought for his country, for his comrades, but in that moment, he knew that Maximus had fought for him too. And now, with his loyal companion by his side, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't alone anymore. The long road to recovery was still ahead, but for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he had the strength to face it. Together, they would face whatever came next. Maximus had proven that he was more than just a dog. He was a lifeline, and Jack was ready to take the next step forward, knowing that no matter what, Maximus would be there. With every step Jack took, Maximus was right there, his paws steady on the floor, his presence a constant reminder that loyalty, love, and companionship could overcome even the darkest of times. Jack glanced back at his loyal companion, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel so alone. Jack sat on the couch, still breathing deeply, trying to steady himself. His body was sore, but each passing minute brought him a little closer to normal. Maximus sat by his side, his warm presence offering Jack the comfort he needed to move forward. Jack's mind, once filled with the chaos of the battlefield, was now quieter, clearer. He could feel the bond between him and Maximus, a bond that had been built on loyalty, trust, and countless shared moments. They had both survived things that most people couldn't even imagine, and now, here they were, together, in this quiet room. The outside world seemed far away, a distant memory. For the first time in months, Jack allowed himself to relax, to just be. He had always been the one to take charge, to fight for others, but now, it was Maximus who was looking out for him. The dog had never hesitated, never questioned what needed to be done. When Jack had been at his lowest, it was Maximus who had stepped in without a second thought. The same way he had on the battlefield, the same way he had in the darkest moments of Jack's life. Maximus was there. The dog's steady breathing was a reminder that, no matter what had happened in the past, they still had each other. Jack took a moment to look down at the dog, his loyal companion, and smiled. He had been through so much, but with Maximus by his side, it didn't feel like an impossible journey. Slowly, Jack reached down and scratched behind Maximus' ears, feeling the soft fur beneath his fingers. Maximus leaned into the touch, his eyes closing in contentment. In that moment, everything felt right. The world outside was still a place of uncertainty, but here, In this room, Jack knew he wasn't alone. He wasn't alone in his battle anymore. Maximus was the silent protector, the one who had always understood, even when words failed. The road to recovery would be long, but Jack no longer felt like he was facing it alone. He could feel the weight of the past lifting off his shoulders, little by little, with each breath he took. As he sat there, with Maximus by his side, he knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. The bond they shared was unbreakable, forged through time, battle, and unwavering loyalty. Jack wasn't just surviving anymore. He was starting to live again. And Maximus, the dog who had been his rock, was right there, every step of the way. The days began to feel longer, but Jack was no longer burdened by the weight of his own despair. With each passing day, he found himself growing stronger. His body still ached, but it was different now, a reminder that he was healing, not just physically, but mentally as well. Maximus was always there, never leaving his side, offering comfort in the most quiet and subtle ways. Every time Jack would falter or feel the weight of his past pressing down on him, Maximus would nudge him, as if to say, "You're not alone in this." Jack began to venture outside again, taking small steps, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind him that life could still be beautiful, even after everything he had been through. Maximus trotted beside him, his ears perked, his eyes scanning the world as always. Jack smiled at the dog's unwavering vigilance. Maximus had always been a protector, but now, he was Jack's shield against the world. It wasn't just the war or the trauma that had made Jack who he was. It was the strength he had within himself and the strength Maximus had given him. Maximus had pulled him back from the edge, not with grand gestures, but with quiet loyalty. Jack knew that he couldn't change the past, but with Maximus by his side, he could build a future. As he walked down the path, Jack realized that he was no longer just surviving. He was living, and Maximus was the reason for that. The dog had given him hope when he had none left. Maximus had reminded him of the power of loyalty, of unconditional love. Jack stopped for a moment, looking down at Maximus, who was sitting at his feet, his head tilted slightly, as if waiting for Jack to give the next command. The bond they shared was something Jack couldn't put into words, but he felt it in every beat of his heart. Maximus had never asked for anything in return. He had been there when Jack needed him most, and now, Jack realized that he would do anything for this dog. The future was still uncertain, but Jack knew one thing for sure. With Maximus by his side, he could face whatever came next. Together, they had survived the darkest moments of their lives. And together, they would face the light of the days to come. Jack stood at the edge of the small park, the wind gently brushing his face, carrying with it the scent of fresh grass and the soft murmur of the world moving around him. It had been weeks since he first started to recover, and while the road ahead still held challenges, he could feel himself growing stronger with each passing day. Maximus sat beside him, his presence as comforting and reassuring as ever. The bond between them had become more than just a companionship. It was a lifeline. Jack could not help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for this incredible dog who had saved him, not just from the brink of death, but from a life filled with pain and isolation. Maximus had been there for him when no one else was, and Jack knew that he would always have this loyal companion by his side. As they walked together, Jack noticed the small changes within himself. He was no longer afraid to take the next step. He was no longer consumed by the darkness that had once seemed all-encompassing. The strength that Maximus had instilled in him was now a part of who he was, woven into the very fabric of his being. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, and with it, a renewed sense of purpose. The world was still full of unknowns, but Jack no longer felt helpless. He knew that, with Maximus by his side, he could face whatever came next. Every step they took together was a reminder that life was still worth living, no matter the struggles they had faced. As they continued to walk down the path, Jack couldn't help but smile. Maximus had been more than a dog to him. He had been his anchor, his constant, unwavering companion. They had both been through so much, and yet here they were, together, moving forward. Jack had learned that healing didn't come from time alone. It came from the strength of the bonds we share with those we love. Maximus had reminded him of that every single day. With the dog at his side, Jack knew that he was no longer alone. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. No matter where life took them, they would face it together. And that, for Jack, was more than enough. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden light over the neighborhood as Jack and Maximus took their daily walk. The days had become routine now, but for Jack, each one felt like a small victory. He had come so far from the man who had once been trapped by the shadows of his past. Now, with Maximus by his side, he was starting to embrace the future, no longer weighed down by fear or uncertainty. The world outside was full of life, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, the distant sounds of children playing, and the hum of life continuing on. Maximus trotted beside Jack, his movements steady and sure, his presence a constant source of comfort. They had become a team, a pair who had fought their own battles, both on the field and off. Jack had learned that healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey. There would be difficult days ahead, moments of doubt, and times when the weight of the past tried to pull him back. But Jack had learned to lean on the strength that Maximus had given him. The dog had been more than just a companion. He had been a lifeline, a reminder that love and loyalty could heal even the deepest wounds. As they reached the park, Jack paused for a moment to watch the sunset. The sky was a brilliant mix of colors, orange, pink, and purple blending together in a beautiful display. Maximus sat at his feet, his eyes focused on the horizon as if taking in the beauty of the world. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the moment fill him. He realized that, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving. He was living with purpose, with hope, and with the love of a dog who had saved him. Jack smiled, his hand resting gently on Maximus' head. The dog leaned into the touch, his tail wagging softly. It was moments like this that reminded Jack of the quiet power of companionship, the bond that could change everything. With Maximus by his side, Jack knew he could face whatever came next. Together, they had survived the darkest of times, and now, they were ready to embrace whatever light the future held. Jack sat quietly in the park, watching as Maximus lay beside him, his head resting on his paws. The world around them seemed peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm Jack had once felt inside. It was hard to believe how far he had come in such a short time. Not long ago, the idea of leaving his home, or even stepping outside, had seemed impossible. Yet here he was, sitting in the warm sunlight with Maximus at his side, a testament to the healing power of time, patience, and unwavering companionship. As the wind rustled the leaves overhead, Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had been given a second chance at life, a chance he wasn't sure he'd have ever had without Maximus. The dog had been his constant, his shadow, always there when Jack needed him the most. Jack had come to realize that true healing didn't just come from physical recovery, but from the emotional support and bond that tied him to Maximus. Maximus had never questioned Jack, never judged him for his past. The dog had simply been there, offering comfort, loyalty, and love in a way that Jack hadn't known was possible. With each day that passed, Jack's strength grew. He wasn't rushing the process anymore. He was learning to take it slow, to appreciate the small victories, the moments of peace, and the quiet moments of reflection. Jack knew the journey ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be times when the weight of his past would try to creep back in, but he also knew that with Maximus by his side, he would face it head on. He wasn't alone anymore. As he looked down at Maximus, the dog's amber eyes locked onto his with a quiet understanding. Jack couldn't help but smile, feeling a warmth in his heart that he hadn't felt in years. He reached down and gently scratched behind Maximus' ears, a simple gesture, but one that spoke volumes. Maximus's tail wagged in response, his eyes closing in contentment. Jack knew in that moment that the future, though still uncertain, held hope. Together, they had survived the darkest times, and together, they would continue to move forward. Jack had found a new purpose in life, not just for himself, but for the dog that had given him everything. He wasn't just alive again. He was living, and with Maximus by his side, he would face whatever came next with strength, hope, and the unbreakable bond between them. Jack walked through the park, the soft crunch of gravel beneath his boots grounding him in the present moment. Maximus trotted by his side, his posture proud yet relaxed, as if every step they took together was a small victory. The world around them had become a place of quiet peace, the kind that Jack had longed for during his darkest days. Every day felt like a new beginning, and for the first time in years, Jack felt like he was truly living, not just surviving. He glanced down at Maximus, who looked up at him with eyes full of understanding and loyalty. The dog's presence was a constant reminder of everything that had changed, everything that had been made possible. Jack remembered the man he had been just months ago, alone, trapped in his memories, unsure of how to move forward. But with Maximus by his side, Jack had found a way. The dog had been his anchor, his lifeline, and together they had healed in ways that Jack had never imagined possible. As they reached the bench at the center of the park, Jack sat down, letting the warmth of the sun soak into his skin. Maximus sat beside him, resting his head on Jack's leg, content to simply be there. Jack leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment and feeling the soft breeze brush against his face. It wasn't just the world that had changed, Jack had changed too. He had come to understand that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about accepting it and learning to move forward with the strength that it had given him. He had found that strength in the bond he shared with Maximus. Maximus had been with him through the hardest moments of his life, and in return, Jack knew he would always be there for the dog, just as he had been there for him. Together, they had built something unbreakable, a bond that no amount of time or hardship could erase. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, Jack felt a sense of contentment that had eluded him for so long. Life wasn't perfect, and there would always be challenges ahead, but with Maximus by his side, Jack knew that he was ready to face whatever came next. They were no longer just surviving. They were living, together, one day at a time. The sun had set, casting long shadows over the park as Jack and Maximus made their way back to the small house that had become their home. The world seemed quieter now, more peaceful than Jack had ever known it. He no longer felt like he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. The memories of war, the isolation, the pain, all of it had been heavy, like a constant storm cloud hanging over him. But now, with each day, that cloud was starting to break apart. Maximus walked beside him, his stride confident and steady. Jack knew that the dog was more than just a companion. Maximus had been the anchor that had kept him grounded when everything else seemed to be falling apart. They had come so far together. Jack couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the bond they shared. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about living, truly living, in a world that Jack had once thought he would never re-enter. He had started to make plans again, small ones at first. A walk in the park, a visit to the local diner, just simple things that he hadn't thought possible. Maximus had opened the door to a life that Jack had thought he had lost. As they reached the front door, Jack paused for a moment, taking in the stillness of the night. The air was cool, and the faint sound of crickets could be heard in the distance. He looked down at Maximus, who was looking up at him with those loyal amber eyes, and he felt a deep sense of peace. It wasn't just the world around him that had changed, it was him. Jack had learned to accept his past, to embrace it, and to use it as a foundation for the life he was now building. He wasn't the man he once was, but that wasn't a bad thing. He had found strength in his vulnerability, courage in his healing, and hope in the love of a dog who had never given up on him. Jack opened the door and stepped inside, feeling the familiar warmth of home surround him. Maximus followed, his tail wagging slightly as he settled by the door. Jack sat down on the couch, exhausted but content. It had been a long road, but Jack knew that he was on the right path now. With Maximus by his side, there was nothing he couldn't face. Together, they had faced the darkness and come out the other side. And as Jack leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment, he realized that this was just the beginning. The future was still uncertain, but he was no longer afraid. With Maximus at his side, he could face whatever came next. Jack woke up to the soft light filtering through the curtains. The room was quiet, peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos that once consumed his mind. It had become his new normal, this calm, steady rhythm of life that he had started to embrace. Maximus was already up, lying by the door, his head resting on his paws, his eyes flicking up to meet Jack's as he stirred. There was no need for words. Maximus always knew when Jack was awake, when he needed something, even if it was just a moment of companionship. Jack sat up, stretching slowly, the aches from his past life still lingering but growing less and less with each day. He glanced at Maximus, who was already standing, wagging his tail lightly as if to say, "What's next?" Jack smiled, his heart warmed by the dog's presence. The bond they shared had become something deeper than just man and dog. It was a partnership, a mutual understanding, and Jack had learned to cherish every moment of it. As he got dressed and made his way downstairs, Maximus followed him like a shadow, always by his side, his movements as smooth as ever. Jack was no longer the man who feared what the world had to offer. He wasn't the man who had been paralyzed by his past, by the weight of his memories. Now, he was someone who had learned to move forward, to take each step with Maximus by his side. The world outside still held its challenges, but Jack knew he had the strength to face them. Maximus had taught him that. They had both faced their demons and come out stronger on the other side. Jack opened the door, feeling the cool morning air rush in, filling his lungs with the freshness of a new day. Maximus darted outside, his tail wagging enthusiastically, ready for their morning walk. Jack followed, taking in the simple beauty of the world around him. The streets were quiet, and as they walked, Jack found himself noticing the small details, the way the light hit the leaves, the way the wind felt against his skin, the sound of Maximus's paws on the pavement. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt alive. He wasn't just going through the motions anymore. He was living, truly living, and it was because of the love and loyalty of the dog by his side. Maximus had given him the strength to face the day, to see the world not as a place of fear and loss, but as a place of opportunity, of hope. As they walked together, Jack felt the weight of his past lift a little more, replaced by the promise of a future he was finally ready to embrace. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. As long as Maximus was with him, he could face anything.